The Liberal Party leadership is set to come to a head early next week. We're joined now by Mark Kenny, the Chief Political Correspondent for Fairfax. Mark, hello.
Hello, Chris.
Now, this spill motion, two MPs said that they will go ahead with a spill motion on Tuesday. Let's consider that first. If it does go ahead on Tuesday, that means Monday sits on Parliament. There's Tony Abbott exposed to Labor ridicule. It gives Tony Abbott's challengers more time to organise. Possible the meeting could be moved forward?
I think it is possible the meeting could get moved forward to Monday. I mean, there's going to be a lot of talk amongst Liberal MPs over the weekend. Things have obviously been escalated quite considerably on Friday, and so over the weekend I'd expect Liberals will be furiously talking to each other. There'll be recriminations flying around, a lot of bitterness, a lot of hope, a lot of speculation, and a lot of people probably hedging their bets. But one thing we can say for sure is that the Prime Minister will be very, very nervous about this. The numbers are probably going away from him, and people who've seen these things before say that whatever numbers he has are not likely to grow. If anything, they're likely to shrink. So this could be a close-run thing. Now, it may be that the Prime Minister in that context decides, and because of what you said about Parliament, to bring it on Monday rather than leaving it until Tuesday.
Now, on Friday, after the two WA MPs said that they will push ahead with this spill motion, Tony Abbott appeared in a very, very short media conference, said that he will oppose the spill motion and he looks to Julie Bishop to support him in opposing the spill motion. Now, what do we know about Julie Bishop's position?
Well, I think it was even more than that. He really locked her in with him. He said he's spoken to Julie Bishop and that the pair would stand together as the two leaders in opposing the motion. Now,
has she been railroaded, I guess, is what I'm asking.
Yes, that's right. And it certainly appeared that he had done a deal with Julie Bishop. But, of course, quite quickly after that, it became clear upon contacting her office, trying to find out what her position was, that she might have been misrepresented, and that does appear to be the case. When you look at the words that Julie Bishop issued after the Prime Minister's statement, it's very clear that the grounds upon which she is opposing this spill motion are simply the grounds of being the deputy leader. In other words, she's saying, because I'm deputy leader, I will be standing with the leader and opposing it, but that's it. She issued no statement saying Tony Abbott is the best leader that the Liberal Party could have. She issued no instruction or encouragement or condemnation for people who were, pushing this motion, this spill motion. So really, it's what Julie Bishop didn't say that was more telling than what she did.
So she's locked into supporting the Prime Minister because she's part of the leadership team and she's part of Cabinet. But if the spill motion is successful and the leadership positions are then vacant,
all bets are off.
All bets are off. She's free to run for the leadership, indeed.
Well, that's right, and so is just about anyone else. Now, Malcolm Turnbull's, of course, one of the big sleepers here. He's the name most talked about as the likely alternative to Tony Abbott, but Julie Bishop remains in the frame as well. What she has made clear to colleagues is that she's not interested in being part of a ticket. Now, that applies to standing with Tony Abbott now in relation to this spill motion. She's just opposing it because she's opposing her own position being declared vacant. But she's not standing in a ticket with Tony Abbott, and presumably she wouldn't be standing in a ticket with Malcolm Turnbull afterwards. So it may be that what we see, let's assume that we do get to a point where this spill motion goes ahead and it gets up. I would think that the people putting their names forward initially for the leadership would include Malcolm Turnbull and Julie Bishop and potentially Tony Abbott, although it's possible after a spill motion getting up that he would decide he was already out of the race. I don't know. These are very difficult things to calculate. And there could be others who throw their names in the hat as well. Andrew Robb, for example, has been mentioned. Scott Morrison, although he's ruled himself out so far.
Let's walk through a few scenarios here of what could happen in the next few days up until early next week. Now, I guess there is the first possibility is that this doesn't happen because it becomes clear that Tony Abbott has lost support and therefore declares the positions vacant anyway. Would you rate that as any kind of credible possibility?
Before today, I would have rated it as a reasonably high possibility, not necessarily because he had lost all support, but rather because what he would want to do is work out who's standing against him. As I say, if he loses the spill motion, then that's effectively been a vote of no confidence by the party room. More than half of the party room, if it gets pushed to an actual spill motion and that motion gets up, more than half of the party room will have voted to spill the position. And Tony Abbott would, and many other people would probably see that as an indication that he doesn't have the numbers anymore. So what happens from there, I guess, remains to be seen. If he avoided that, however, if he said, well, OK, there's a mood on in the party room, we want to declare these positions vacant, and he therefore gave the spill, gave over to the spill without putting it to a vote, then at least he could then see, right, who am I up against? Will they split each other's vote? Can I canvass votes? And so forth. OK,
another scenario that's possible before the meeting is that those proposing the spill, we have senior ministers saying, please withdraw this motion. Is it possible that those agitating against Tony Abbott may indeed withdraw the spill motion, or do you think that's very unlikely?
I think there's some pressure being applied to them from other backbenchers. I understand that Christian Porter in WA, another WA backbencher, has called on them to withdraw the motion. I'm sure there are plenty of ministers who have called on them. I know Matthias Cormann, a senior minister, the finance minister, a senior player in Western Australia, also has expressed very strong support for the Prime Minister. So there probably is a bit of pressure on these guys to pull their heads in, but I think this thing's gone way past that at this stage. It isn't limited to just these two renegades. There are plenty of people in the party room who think, one, that Tony Abbott's leadership is now cactus, and two, that this has to be resolved in a very decisive way. It can't just simply be, you can't march your troops up the hill and then just march them back down again. You have to actually fight. OK, now let's walk the scenario one step forward. Let's say the party room meets, there is a spill motion. Say it's on a show of hands. It's not clear whether it's show of hands, secret ballot, whatever. Say there's a show of hands. The motion is defeated, so there's no spill. Does that resolve the matter? Well, again, it does depend a little bit on the numbers. Assuming that it was only a smattering of hands that went up, then I guess those people would be discredited, and probably after a period of time, the situation might change, but probably for some, it would buy Tony Abbott some time. Now, during that time, he might be able to rebuild the government stocks a bit. They might be able to turn around the flagging polls. They might be able to, present in a different way and not make mistakes, although that's fairly unlikely. I think more likely is the case that if the spill motion falls short, then it will only be a matter of time before there's another tilt.
Now, Paul Keating always made the point, talking about leadership. He, of course, took Bob Hawke on famously twice, and was victorious in the end. His criticism of Peter Costello was always, you can't wait for it to come to you. You've got to get blood on your hands. You've got to get dirty. You've got to get in there. Might it be the case that come Monday or Tuesday, there's this spill motion coming, that Malcolm Turnbull and perhaps Julie Bishop really have to show their hands, be prepared to lose, be prepared to go to the backbench, whatever, if they actually want the job?
It's a very good question. It's one of the things that we haven't seen much of in leadership changes more recently, people being prepared to actually put their hands up, put their jobs on the line. That's certainly what Paul Keating did. It's what Peter Costello was never prepared to do, and who knows, he might be Prime Minister now had he ever done that. But it could come to that. What's going to be interesting is the extent to which both of these people are prepared to, sort of duke it out. And bearing in mind that both Julie Bishop and Malcolm Turnbull are moderates in the party, they do draw from some of the same people. Probably Julie Bishop's sort of pool of support is a little bit broader than Malcolm Turnbull's, but he's seen as, I think, more of the likely victor in the end.
Now, I imagine that Tony Abbott is very worried at the moment because those two, Malcolm Turnbull and Julie Bishop, haven't come out with unequivocal sort of expressions of support. Clearly they're considering their positions. As you say, they draw on similar support groups in the party. If they were over the weekend to come to some sort of agreement, some sort of ticket, perhaps incorporating other people in their ticket, say offering Scott Morrison the Treasury, etc., does that then become quite a viable type of option for the party room to consider?
I think that would be a nightmare for Tony Abbott. Effectively, it would broaden the base. Now, I don't know whether it's actually possible. I think what's more likely is that the way the Liberal Party works is that they would stand as individuals, and whoever finished second out of that other group, probably it might be Julie Bishop, I suspect, would then throw her support to Malcolm Turnbull to get him over the line in the second round ballot. That's the kind of thing. These things are very hard to read in the Liberal Party, but I think that's probably more likely. Now, it is entirely possible, as you suggest, that in that process, or even before that process, some arrangements are entered into with others, such as Scott Morrison, who has some influence and some support in the party room, and he would be inclined to put his support there in exchange for, as you say, perhaps the key portfolio of Treasury. All of these things might happen, but of course they mostly will be kept secret until such time as they've played out.
Now, some very senior press gallery journalists with decades and decades of experience, Michelle Grattan and Laurie Oakes, have basically said that they don't think Tony Abbott can survive this. He may survive next week, but in the long term he won't survive to the election. Does that, do you think, will those sort of conclusions weigh on the mind of backbenchers, some of them who are nowhere near as experienced as, say, those two journalists? Will that weigh on their mind as they consider their options?
I don't know. That's a good question. I suspect that it will sway some, and others will just write them off as being, part of the sort of, commentariat that's always looking for, the big result. I don't know, but I think they'd be wise to take the advice, to at least consider that experience, because between that pair, Laurie Oakes and Michelle Grattan, there's an awful lot of history, and there are many, many leadership stoushes.
Now, one thing that may sway backbenchers are opinion polls. What do we know about the standing of the various candidates in the polls?
Well, of course, this is one of the sort of things that's driving the government's problem at the moment, that it remains structurally behind the Labor Party. Some polling that Channel 7 commissioned with ReachTel over the last few days is quite telling on that, and may in fact have quite a significant impact on the thinking of Liberal MPs. That shows that a 10-point deficit that the government is experiencing at the moment to Labor, that is 45-55 in the two-party preferred, would be almost sort of reversed entirely if the Liberal Party were to switch to Malcolm Turnbull. That is, under a Malcolm Turnbull leadership, the ReachTel poll showed that the numbers turn around to be 54-46 in the government's favour. Now, that's the power of someone like Turnbull, really, that he offers potentially the government a chance to get back ahead on polling terms, something that hasn't been the case really consistently since about late November of 2013, not that long after it was elected.
And just finally, Mark, if Tony Abbott were to survive, how much damage would this whole episode, this past week, and the instability and the challenge to his authority, how much damage does that do to the government? I
think it's done enormous damage to the government. I think this whole exercise has done enormous damage to the government. A lot of it's to do... This is the thing. Tony Abbott is a sort of a high-impact operator, and he played a very hard game when he was in opposition. He applied maximum pressure to Labor when it was going through all of its problems, and he had an excellent effect, at least in political terms, for his side. But the cost to the Australian polity was quite high. We now see the same things happening to him. Now, unlike those Labor leaders who had each other sort of chipping away and all those things going on in the background, this government's woes have largely been brought on by Tony Abbott's decisions himself, or at least those of his cabinet. A series of broken promises and backflips and curious sort of policy flights of fancy, such as the Knights and Dames thing, the PPL, the Paid Parental Leave Scheme, these sorts of things have just shaken the judgment of Australian voters, and indeed those in his party room. So it's not really been Malcolm Turnbull or anyone else who's been chipping away or causing instability from inside the government, albeit that's really ramped up in the last 2 or 3 weeks. But the government's woes are all about its inability to govern without making mistakes, and that's, I think, what's really harmed Tony Abbott's chances of recovering here. People don't believe. I mean, it's not like under Labor where you could say of Julia Gillard, if she could get some clear air, if she could just get a period of time when she wasn't being undermined by Kevin Rudd or his supporters, that maybe she could start to get ahead in the polls. I mean, that government made plenty of mistakes as well. But the difficulty I think Liberals are looking at the moment is that their leader has actually brought them to this point and they don't believe he can change.
Okay, Mark Kenny, thanks for your insights.
Thanks, Chris.